For 2 decades, Carole Middleton was Britain's ultimate success story. She was the Queen of Bucklebury, the commoner mother-in-law of a future king who built a multi-million-pound empire from her kitchen table. She was the secret weapon that provided the stability and normalcy that Prince William craved. She was discreet, successful, and the only royal outsider who seemed to have won the Game of Thrones. And then tragedy struck. In just 12 months, everything collapsed. Her family business imploded, leaving millions of pounds in debt and angry creditors. The same press that once celebrated her now framed her as a failed entrepreneur, and some commentators even began drawing parallels with France's Shand Kydd. How did the woman who won face the same fate as Diana's mother? This is the story of the terrible price paid for entering the House of Windsor. The real story of Carole Middleton doesn't begin with her. It begins with the world that created her. It begins in England in the 1950s and 60s. When Carole Goldsmith was born in 1955, the lines of class were not just lines, they were brick walls. This was a country still recovering from the war, and the social hierarchy was rigid. You were born into a class, and for the most part, you died in it. Carole was born in Ealing, a working-class borough of London. Her father, Ronald Goldsmith, was a builder. Her mother, Dorothy, was something else. Dorothy Goldsmith is perhaps the secret key to the entire Middleton story. She was, by all accounts, a force of nature, ambitious, driven, and acutely aware of the social ladder. She was the one who pushed the family, who dreamed of something more than their small council flat in Southall. The word striver is often used as an insult in Britain, but Dorothy Goldsmith was a striver in the truest sense. She saw education and self-improvement as the only way out. She taught her children to speak properly, to present themselves well. She wasn't just raising children, she was launching them. This context is everything. Carole didn't just become ambitious, she inherited ambition. She grew up in an environment where bettering oneself wasn't just a casual idea, it was a daily mission. This was the aspirational working class, the generation that would later fuel the Thatcherite dream of social mobility. But in the 1960s, the paths for a smart, pretty working-class girl were limited. You could be a nurse, a secretary, or you could join the new glamorous world of air travel. In 1970s Britain, being a trolley dolly for British Airways wasn't just a job, it was a passport. It was the golden ticket out of your social strata. BA was the flag carrier, the height of sophistication. The women who worked those cabins were seen as the epitome of British grace and glamour. They weren't just serving drinks, they were traveling the world, mixing with an international crowd, and learning a Polish that you just couldn't get in Southall. This is the world Carole Goldsmith entered. And she was, by all accounts, brilliant at it. But Carole was never just going to be a flight attendant. She was Dorothy Goldsmith's daughter. She was always looking for the next step. And that step was Michael Middleton. Carole's ambition, inherited from her mother Dorothy, had given her a passport out of her class and a glimpse of a bigger world. But to build an empire, she needed more than just drive. She needed a foundation. She found that foundation in a quiet, unassuming, and safe flight dispatcher. A man who on the surface was her colleague, but in the coded language of British class was her opposite. If Carole Goldsmith was the raw kinetic energy of ambition, Michael Middleton was the stable, conductive anchor that allowed her to harness it. When Carole met Michael Middleton at British Airways, it was more than a meet-cute between a flight attendant and a flight dispatcher. It was the collision of two different but complementary Britons. Michael, while not an aristocrat, was cut from a different cloth entirely. The Middletons were not new money. They were, and this is a crucial distinction in England, established upper middle class. His family tree was rooted in Leeds, where his ancestors had been wealthy wool merchants and solicitors for generations. His grandfather, Richard Noel Middleton, was a solicitor who had played host to members of the royal family. His own father, Peter Middleton, had been an RAF pilot who flew as co-pilot with Prince Philip. The Middletons had connections, inherited wealth, and the kind of quiet, understated old money respectability that the Goldsmiths, with their working-class London roots, could only dream of. Michael was polite, gentle, and stable. He was the safe harbor to Carole's ambition. Their marriage in 1980 was, therefore, not just a union. It was a strategic merger. It was Carole's Goldsmith drive, that relentless striver gene from her mother Dorothy, fused with the Middleton name, stability, and social platform. Michael was the partner who didn't just tolerate her ambition. He enabled it. They settled down. The requisite children arrived in quick succession. Catherine in 1982, Philippa, known as Pippa, in 1983, and James in 1987. For a brief time, they lived an almost normal life. Michael's job took them to Amman, Jordan, for 2.5 years. This period is often overlooked, but it's significant. Living as expats, the Middletons were removed from the rigid British class system. It gave them a taste of a different life, and for Carole, it likely cemented her desire for something more than just being a BA wife in a comfortable English suburb. When they returned to the UK in 1986, the ambition she had inherited was burning. She was 32 years old, a mother of 3 young children, and she was restless. She didn't just want to be a wife and mother. She wanted to build something. The legend of party pieces is now a core part of the Middleton mythology, and like all legends, it's both true and brilliantly curated. The story goes that in 1987, Carole was in her West Berkshire cottage trying to find decent party supplies for 5-year-old Kate's birthday. She was unimpressed. The shops offered the same old, tired, basic decorations. This is the moment of Carole's genius. She didn't just see a lack of party bags. She saw a psychological gap. This was the late 1980s, the height of Thatcher's Britain. A new aspirational middle class was booming. These were parents, just like Carole, who had worked hard, made their own money, and were now deeply, intensely competitive. They didn't just want a party for their child. They wanted a statement. They wanted the party to be tasteful, creative, organized, and just a little bit better than the neighbors. Carole understood this instinct perfectly because it was her instinct. She wasn't just selling paper plates and balloons. She was selling the perfect children's party. She was selling taste, her taste. Party pieces started as a hobby. She distributed leaflets at Kate's local nursery school. She packed boxes in her garden shed. But her timing was exquisite, and her understanding of the aspirational parent was unparalleled. The business didn't just grow, it exploded. It was the right product at the right time, aimed squarely at the burgeoning competitive home counties mothers of 1990s Britain. The business boomed. The money for the first time wasn't just comfortable, it was serious. And with that boom came the single most important, destiny-altering decision of Carole Middleton's life. It was a decision that would, without exaggeration, change the course of British history. It was the decision of where to send their children to school. With their newfound wealth, the Middletons could have done many things. They could have bought a bigger house, settled into their local, well-regarded state schools, and lived a very comfortable upper-middle-class life. But that was never the Goldsmith/Middleton way. Carole and Michael didn't just want their children to be comfortable. They wanted them to be exceptional. They were playing a different game, so they took the biggest, gamble of their lives. They bypassed the good local schools. They bypassed the lesser private schools. They aimed for the absolute stratosphere of the English education system, Marlborough College. It is almost impossible to overstate what a monumental bet-the-farm decision this was. Marlborough is not just a school, it's a social institution. One of the most elite, expensive, and prestigious co-educational boarding schools in England, its fees were, at the time, cripplingly expensive, well over £10,000 a year per child. By the time all 3 children were enrolled, the school fees would have been consuming a vast chunk of their income. This was a phenomenal financial risk. Party Pieces was a young company. A bad year could have ruined them. But Carole was adamant. This was the moment the social climber narrative, which would haunt her for decades, was truly born. And the snobbery, by all accounts, was brutal. Carole's new social set, the other Marlborough parents, were not new money like her. They were old money. They were aristocrats. They were landowners. They were the people who looked down their noses at trade, especially trade that smelled of party poppers, and was being run by a former flight attendant. Reports from that time paint a picture of quiet, cutting exclusion. The Middleton sisters, Kate and Pippa, were reportedly looked down upon. They were the daughters of the help, the stockbroker set, not the landed set. They were, in the cruel parlance of the upper classes, not quite our class, darling. But Dorothy Goldsmith's granddaughter does not back down. Carole Middleton didn't flinch. In fact, she did the opposite. She and Michael worked relentlessly. They poured everything into Party Pieces, not just to pay the fees, but to prove they belonged. Carole understood what she was buying. She wasn't just paying for an education in history or math. She was buying an entry. She was buying her children a network. She was buying them the cut glass accent, the effortless polish, and the supreme social confidence that she and Michael had had to fight for. She was forging them the armor they would need to walk in any room, with anyone, even perhaps in a palace. And then came St. Andrews. For royal historians and cynical media commentators, this is it. This is the smoking gun in the case of Carole the Climber. In the year 2000, the palace announced that Prince William, the most eligible bachelor on the planet, would be attending the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. At that exact moment, Kate Middleton, having just finished Marlborough, was reportedly all set to go to Edinburgh University. Her A-level results were in, her place was confirmed, but then a last-minute change of plan. Kate, just like William, suddenly decided to take a gap year, and then Kate, just like William, suddenly reapplied to St. Andrews to study art history, the very same subject William was enrolled in. She was accepted, and the rest is history. How much of this was Carole's master plan? The media, of course, has portrayed her as a modern-day Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, pushing her eldest daughter toward the prize. The truth, as ever, is likely more subtle. Did Carole sit at the kitchen table and order her daughter to change universities and chase the prince? Almost certainly not. But did she create an environment where this was seen as a possible and desirable outcome? Did she, with surgical precision, place her daughter in the one tiny, exclusive pond on Earth where she might be in a position to catch the biggest fish? Absolutely. Carole didn't make William fall in love with Kate, but she did, with a lifetime of strategic planning, give Kate the education, the confidence, the accent, and the social skills to compete in that environment. She put her on the field. Kate did the rest. The decade that followed was the true test, the brutal, humiliating, weighty Katie years. As William finished university, joined the military, and dithered about his future, Kate was left in public limbo. The press was merciless. They mocked her. They stalked her. They counted how many days she had been left waiting. But through it all, Kate had a secret weapon. She had her mother, and Carole was not idle. While the press mocked, Carole was building the real fortress, not a business, but a home. The Middleton family home in Bucklebury, Berkshire, a lovely, sprawling but not palatial country house, became William's real home. This is the most overlooked and most brilliant part of Carole's entire strategy. Think about Prince William, a young man who had lost his mother in a global tragedy, a young man with a famously distant, emotionally stunted father and a family life defined by stiff protocol, nannies, and cold castles. He didn't just find a girlfriend at St. Andrews. He found a family. He found the Middleton rules. At Bucklebury, life was normal. It was noisy. It was chaotic. It was warm. Carole was in the kitchen cooking a Sunday roast. Michael was grilling. The dog was barking. People were laughing and arguing and teasing. For William, this was an alien and deeply, profoundly intoxicating world. Carole wasn't just Kate's mom. She became his second mom. She was the anchor, the domestic center, the matriarch who held everything together. She offered him the one thing his billion-dollar birthright and his royal titles could never, ever buy: a happy, functional, loving family. She was the anchor. And when William and Kate briefly and famously broke up in 2007, Carole's response was a masterclass in strategy. Did Kate retreat? Did she cry in her room? Number. Carole's response was magnificent. She was photographed arm in arm with Kate at high-profile social events, at parties, at race meetings. Kate, under her mother's guidance, looked sensational. She was smiling, poised, and utterly unbothered. The message was clear, and it was aimed squarely at one person. We are fine. We are Middletons. We do not crumble. And this is what you are missing. Carole played the long, long game. She understood something profound. The way to William's heart wasn't through status or titles or bowing and scraping. It was through normality. And in 2010, after nearly a decade, the gamble paid off. William proposed. The wedding in 2011 was not just Kate's day. It was Carole Middleton's coronation. It was her ultimate public, spectacular vindication. As she walked into Westminster Abbey, a descendant of coal miners from County Durham, to watch her daughter marry the future King of England, the entire world was watching. And the snobs were out in full force. The classist jibes were relentless. One aristocratic friend of the royals infamously sneered to a journalist that Carole's first words to the Queen would surely be, "Pleased to meet you," a vulgar working-class phrase instead of the correct, "How do you do?" Another report claimed she had chewed gum during her first visit to the Queen at Balmoral. And of course there was the doors to manual jibe, the relentless, cruel daily reminder from the press that she was and always would be just a flight attendant. Carole's response, the same response that had served her so well for decades: silence. She didn't give an interview. She didn't issue a statement. She simply glided into that abbey in a perfect, elegant, pale blue Catherine Walker, Diana's favorite designer, a masterful, poignant, and deeply strategic choice. She was poise personified. She was elegant. She was appropriate. She did not put a single solitary foot wrong. She didn't say a word. She just won. Her mother, Dorothy, the ambitious matriarch from the council flat, the woman who had started it all, lived just long enough to see her granddaughter become a duchess. It was the perfect, symmetrical, triumphant end to the fairy tale. Carole Middleton had done the impossible. She had breached the walls of the most exclusive, most powerful, most ruthless club in the world, and she had done it on her own terms. She was now arguably the most powerful and respected mother-in-law in the kingdom, the matriarch of a perfect, solid, successful new brand, What could possibly go wrong? So she had won. The 2011 wedding was her public coronation. Carole Middleton had achieved the impossible. But in the world of the Windsors, the wedding isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the real test. How would this commoner, now the most famous mother-in-law on earth, navigate the most dangerous and exclusive family in Britain? She would do it with a single powerful and unexpected weapon. For the next decade, Carole Middleton's strategy was flawless. And that strategy, her ultimate weapon, was silence. Silence, in the context of the British royal family, is the ultimate form of soft power. It is the one thing the Windsors value almost more than loyalty: discretion. Silence refuses to give oxygen to the media fire. It projects stability, dignity, and most importantly, it doesn't create drama. And this is where the comparison to Frances Shand Kydd becomes so clear and profound. Frances, like Carole, was an outsider, though she came from the aristocracy. But when her daughter, Diana, was thrust onto the global stage, Frances talked. She gave interviews. She wrote furious letters to the press. She had a public, volatile, and at times bitter relationship with Diana. They famously weren't on speaking terms when Diana died. Frances was emotional, impulsive, and she fed the media beast. Carole did the exact opposite. Publicly, she disappeared. She and Michael became the silent partners of the firm. They were the absolute model of royal in-laws. They were present, but never overbearing. Carole's image at events became iconic. At Wimbledon, she was in the royal box just behind the senior royals. At Trooping the Colour, she was on a nearby balcony, but not the Buckingham Palace balcony. At royal christening, she was there, smiling, a pillar of support. She was always appropriate, always smiling, and always silent. But this public silence was a strategic illusion, because behind the scenes, her influence was enormous. It wasn't just big, it was foundational to the future of the monarchy. Carole effectively became the co-parent of the next generation of kings. Consider the most critical moment, when Prince George, the future King of England, was born in 2013. After a few days in the hospital, where did the infant king go? Not to Buckingham Palace, not to Windsor Castle. He went to Bucklebury. He went to Carole's house. We cannot overstate the significance of this. It was a palace revolution, conducted from a country kitchen. For the first time in modern history, the firm had admitted publicly that their way, the way of nannies, protocol, and stiffness, was not the best way. They needed the Middleton way. Carole Middleton, the commoner, became an informal model for the hands-on parenting style William and Catherine wanted for their children. And the Middleton rules were now the guiding principles. Rule number 1, and most important, family first. Not the firm first, but family. Rule number 2, hands-on involvement. It was muddy boots, home-cooked dinners. Carole is famously an excellent cook. Messy days out, and emotional availability. It was everything the traditional Windsor model was not. The Windsor model was night nannies, matrons, and sending children to boarding school at age 8. It was a system designed to produce monarchs, not warm human beings. Carole provided the warmth, and the royals. They loved her for it, or at least they needed her. King Charles, it was said, was bemused by the conventional chaos of the Middleton household. He didn't understand why everyone wanted to sit and eat in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room, but he was also deeply grateful. Carole had given his eldest son the one thing he had never truly had: a happy, stable family anchor. Queen Elizabeth II, ever the pragmatist, was reportedly charmed. She saw the results. William was happy. The legacy was secure. Carole had given the monarchy the one thing it was desperate for: a veneer of relatable middle-class normality. Carole had become a new archetype. She wasn't just mother of the bride. She was anointed by the press as Super Granny. The press adored this brand. It was perfect. She was stylish, fit, always photographed playing tennis. She was a self-made, successful businesswoman and a devoted hands-on grandmother. She was the other Queen Mother, but modern, accessible, and aspirational. And for a time, she was even held up as the antidote to the other ambitious commoner who had joined the family, Meghan Markle. When Meghan and Harry's royal life imploded in a storm of interviews and accusations, the press made an immediate, brutal comparison. Meghan was portrayed as loud, difficult, demanding, and talked too much. Carole was the perfect model. The press pointed to Carole and Kate and said, "This is how an outsider should behave. Silent, dutiful, discreet, never complain, never explain." Carole's silence, her perfect, poised blankness, had become her greatest asset. It was now, ironically, being used by the media as a weapon against another member of the family. Carole had mastered the game. She had reached the absolute zenith of royal and public acceptance. But the game was about to change. And the two pillars that held up the entire Middleton fortress, their flawless PR and their successful independent business, were about to crumble all at once. For an entire decade, the Middleton brand, built on this flawless silence, seemed invincible. She was Super Granny, the perfect antidote to royal dysfunction. But the fortress Carole had built rested on those two deeply intertwined pillars: her flawless public reputation and her independent, successful business. And in the 2020s, both would be put to the test, and both would spectacularly fail. The first crack was small but telling. For years, critics had pointed out that party pieces seemed to be, shall we say, enjoying its royal connection. The company's website would feature blog posts from Kate's mom on how to host a perfect royal-themed party. They sold best of British party wear. Was this just savvy marketing, or was it a breach of that silent royal protocol? The climber narrative, which had been dormant for years, began to resurface. Was Carole Middleton using her daughter's title to sell party hats? To the snobs, it was proof of what they'd always believed. She was trade, and she was cashing in. To her defenders, it was just business. She was a businesswoman before Kate was a duchess, so why should she stop? But this was just a prelude. The real storm was brewing. In 2020, the world shut down. And for a business like Party Pieces, which relied entirely on people partying, it was an extinction-level event. The company, which had been a cash cow for decades, was suddenly hemorrhaging money. Reports began to leak. The Middletons had taken out substantial loans. They were struggling. This in itself was a problem, but it was how it ended that destroyed the Middleton brand. In June 2023, Party Pieces collapsed into administration. It was sold, but not before it racked up debts of over £2.6 million. This wasn't just a business failure. This was a mess. And the people who were left unpaid were not banks. They were small businesses. The printers, the suppliers, the delivery companies, the very same small British business people that the Middletons had built their brand on. The headlines were, for the first time, universally, spectacularly bad. Carole's party, shame. Middleton's millions, and the small suppliers left with nothing. One supplier, who was owed thousands, gave a quote to the press that was utterly devastating. He said he had worked with them for years and felt betrayed. He said he might have to lay off staff. In one fell swoop, Carole Middleton's two greatest identities, the savvy businesswoman and the caring maternal figure, were shattered. She was no longer Super Granny. She was, to the press, a millionaire who didn't pay her bills. The woman who had built an empire on the perfect party had left a trail of financial wreckage. She and the family maintained their signature silence. But this time, the silence didn't read as dignified. It read as guilty. Carole had lost her business. She had lost her reputation. But she was about to lose the one thing she prized above all else: control of the narrative. Because just as her personal crisis was peaking, her daughter's public one began. In January 2024, Kensington Palace announced that Catherine, Princess of Wales, had undergone planned abdominal surgery and would be out of the public eye until after Easter. The announcement was vague, and in the information vacuum, the internet went insane. What followed has been called Kategate. It was a global storm of conspiracy, rumor, and cruel speculation. Where was Kate? Was she in a coma? Had she left William? The palaces never complained, never explained strategy. The Windsor strategy failed. The silence that had worked for the Queen for 70 years was no match for TikTok. But where in all of this was Carole Middleton? Where was the matriarch? Where was the woman who had famously guided Kate through the weighty Katie years? Where was the family fortress? Carole was, for the first time, utterly powerless. She was photographed in a car with Kate in the first blurry proof of life photo, but it did nothing. In fact, it only fueled the conspiracies. Then came the Mother's Day disaster. The palace released a photo of Kate and her children. It was meant to be a happy, reassuring, all is well message. But within hours, international news agencies had killed the photo, identifying it as manipulated at the source. It was a PR catastrophe on a scale the family had never faced. And for once, the Middleton rules seemed to have been overtaken by the Windsor machine. The Middleton rules had, it seemed, finally been defeated by the Windsor machine. Carole, the ultimate strategist, had been sidelined. Her daughter was now the property of the palace, and the palace's PR strategy was a dumpster fire. The press, tasting blood, turned on the entire Middleton clan. They were no longer the stable saviors. They were a family in crisis. Carole was the failed businesswoman. Her brother, Gary Goldsmith, was embarrassing the family on Celebrity Big Brother. Her son, James, was speaking publicly about his mental health in interviews and in his writing. Her other daughter, Pippa, was quietly trying to rebrand as a wellness guru. The entire Middleton brand, which Carole had spent 40 years building into a fortress of respectable, aspirational perfection, had crumbled in less than a year. And this is where the ghost of Frances Shand Kydd returns. Frances Shand Kydd, why her? Why that specific haunted name? On the surface, the two women could not be more different. Frances was a pure-blooded aristocrat, born into the old money, land-owning Spencer family, a world of chilly privilege and inherited titles. Carole was a commoner, born in a council flat, a descendant of coal miners, fueled by working-class grit and raw ambition. But this difference in class, so obsessed over by the British media, is ultimately a distraction. The haunting parallels are not in their origins, but in their fate. Both women were outsiders who produced a daughter destined to be queen. Both women were defined by their ambition. Frances's ambition was to escape a life she hated. Carole's was to build one she dreamed of. And both women, after a period of intense public approval, were viciously dethroned by the same media machine that had once built them up. Frances's fall was a long, slow-motion tragedy, but it set the template. Her story wasn't just about her divorce from Earl Spencer. It was that she left him for another man in 1967, a seismic scandal at the time. She was branded a bolter. This led to a brutal custody battle where her own mother testified against her, and she ultimately lost her children, including Diana. The narrative was set. Frances was an unfit and unstable mother. When Diana became a global icon, Frances was relegated to the sidelines, a combustible and difficult figure who talked. She gave interviews. She had a fiery, volatile relationship with her daughter. They famously weren't on speaking terms when Diana died, after a bitter phone call where Francis allegedly berated Diana over her relationships. After Diana's death, the press, having lost its saint, needed a villain besides Charles. They found one in France. She was cast as the cold, difficult, absent mother. When a reporter asked her if she missed Diana, she reportedly snapped, "What's to miss?" The media dethroned her. She was the bad mother to Diana's people's princess. She retreated to a remote, windswept island in Scotland and lived out her days as a virtual recluse, a tragic footnote in her own daughter's story. Now look at Carole. For 20 glorious years, Carole Middleton was the anti-Francis. She was the good mother, the present one, the stable one, the one who didn't talk. Her silence, her poise, her perfect, non-controversial presence was a masterpiece of curated brand management. She was the super granny, the stable earth mother who had given the monarchy the normal family it so desperately needed. But in 2024, the narrative flipped, and it flipped with a speed and a brutality that was shocking. When party pieces collapsed, it wasn't just a business failure, it was a moral failure in the eyes of the press. The truly damaging detail wasn't the £2.6 million debt. It was who was owed the money. It was the small suppliers, the family-run printers, the delivery companies, the very salt of the earth British people that Carole was supposed to represent. Suddenly, she wasn't the savvy businesswoman. She was the greedy commoner who flew too close to the sun and didn't pay her bills. Then, Kategate exploded. As the world descended into a vortex of conspiracy, Carole, the master strategist, the matriarch of the fortress, was shown to be powerless. She was just another worried mother, a bit player in her own daughter's global drama. The one blurry paparazzi photo of her in a car with Kate wasn't seen as reassuring. It was seen as suspicious, controlling, part of the cover-up. The fortress she had built couldn't protect its most precious inhabitant. The press and the public had built Carole up into an impossible ideal, the perfect, flawless, middle-class mother. And the moment she proved to be human, the moment her business failed and her family's PR stumbled, the fall was swift and merciless. This is why the comparison to Francis Shand Kydd is not about class. It is about function. The British media and the royal firm are, together, a narrative machine. The machine needs archetypes to function. It casts people in roles. Frances was cast as the tragic, volatile mother. Diana was cast as the fairy tale princess turned rebel saint. Meghan was cast as the Hollywood disruptor. Carole's role for 2 decades was the stable, silent, successful commoner. She was the anchor that proved the monarchy could modernize. But here is the lesson. The machine only tolerates you as long as you fulfill your function. In 2024, Carole's function expired. Her business was a PR disaster, no longer stable or successful. Her family's famous normality was the center of a global conspiracy. No longer normal, she was no longer useful as the perfect one. So the media, the machine, gave her a new role, the fallen one, the failed one, the commoner who got too greedy. This is the great unspoken tragedy of Carole Middleton. Francis Shand Kydd, in many ways, fought the system. She was loud, she was difficult, she invited the drama. Carole did the absolute opposite. She obeyed the system. She followed the Windsors' own rules of never complain, never explain. She was more Windsor than the Windsors. She was the perfect, silent, dutiful partner. She did everything right. And it still wasn't enough. the system she worked so hard to appease, the media she so skillfully starved of drama, turned on her anyway. The story of Carole Middleton is the story of Francis Shand Kydd, written in a different font. It's the story of what happens when your function is over. It is the final brutal proof that in the world of the Windsors, there is no such thing as safe. There is only useful and not useful anymore. Dethroned by the same machine she worked so hard to appease, that is the tragedy. But it is not the whole story. Her fall is recent, but her legacy, the one she built over 40 years, is already set in stone. So after the business has failed and the media has turned, what is actually left of the Middleton empire? So what in the end is the true legacy of Carole Middleton? Her legacy, first and foremost, is the future of the monarchy itself. It is not stone or steel. It is blood and bone. It is Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Those three children, the direct line of succession, are her true, lasting impact. They are being raised with the Middleton rules, not the Windsor ones. This is not a superficial change. Carole Middleton, the flight attendant from a council flat, has quite literally changed the emotional DNA of the British royal family. She infused a cold, rigid, emotionally stunted dynasty with a dose of pragmatism, warmth, and hands-on emotional intelligence. The old Windsor model, the stiff upper lip, the nannies, the banishment to boarding school at age 8, created emotionally detached figures like King Charles. The Middleton model, the hands-on parenting, the messy kitchen suppers, the prioritization of family over duty, is creating a different kind of monarch. Carole didn't just give William a wife, she gave him a home, and in doing so, taught him how to create one for his own children. This emotional revolution may be the one thing that allows the monarchy to survive in the 21st century. Her second legacy is the Middleton model itself. For 20 years, Carole Middleton wrote the definitive playbook for how a commoner family can successfully integrate with the Windsors. It was a masterpiece of brand management. The rules were simple but required superhuman discipline, absolute ironclad silence, flawless public presentation, unwavering discretion, and crucially, becoming more Windsor than the Windsors, never complaining, never explaining, never ever being a problem. She proved that a woman could come from a working-class background and end up as the beloved grandmother of the future King of England. She created a blueprint for social mobility that is, in its own way, breathtaking. She demonstrated that class could be overcome with sufficient strategy, dignity, and silence. But her story, and this is the tragedy, is also a dark cautionary tale. It is the great central and brutal lesson of the entire royal experiment. The House of Windsor is not a family, it is a system, it is a machine, and the machine consumes. It consumed Diana, turning her into a global martyr, but only after it broke her. It consumed Harry and Meghan, identifying them as a foreign body, attacking them and expelling them from the system. And now, in its own quiet way, it is turning the same ruthless logic on the Middletons. Not with a car crash, but with 1,000 financial reports, 1,000,000 cruel headlines, and the slow, agonizing erosion of the reputation they spent a lifetime building. Carole's mistake, her fatal flaw, was not ambition. It was believing she was the exception. It was a kind of hubris. She believed that her success, her discretion, her perfection, and her normality made her safe. She thought that by being the perfect partner, by providing the perfect heir and the perfect family, she had become a partner in the firm. She was wrong. An outsider is always an outsider. She wasn't accepted, she was tolerated. She wasn't family, she was useful. Her entire function, the role she had been cast in for 20 years, was to be the stable, silent, successful, wealthy, and normal one. But the moment party pieces collapsed, she was no longer successful or wealthy. She was a financial liability and a PR embarrassment. The moment Kategate exploded, her family was no longer stable or normal. They were the center of a global conspiracy. Her function expired, and when your function expires, the machine recasts you. The system and the media that feeds it turned on her. The super granny was recast as the failed businesswoman. The perfect matriarch was recast as the powerless and greedy commoner. This is why she is the Frances Shand Kydd of the 21st century. Not because she is a bad mother or a failed businesswoman, not because she is like Frances at all. In fact, her tragedy is that she was the opposite of Frances. She was silent where Frances was loud. She was stable where Frances was volatile. She followed every rule the Windsors set, and it still wasn't enough. The lesson of Carole Middleton is the lesson of Icarus. She is the outsider who dared to fly, not just near the crown, but into its orbit. She built her wings from ambition and hard work, and for a time, she soared higher than any commoner in modern history. But she is now learning that the sun, the Windsor sun, always burns. It doesn't care if you are a good mother or a bad one. It only cares that you flew too close. To have flown so high only to be burned, it is the brutal, ultimate lesson of the crown. So, what is the final verdict on Carole Middleton? Was she a master strategist brought down by forces beyond her control? A loving mother who simply wanted the best for her children? Or a victim of her own blinding ambition? The truth, perhaps, is that she was all three. The story of Carole Middleton is not in the end a fairy tale. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy of class ambition and the illusion of control. Carol Goldsmith, the girl from the council flat, played the game better than anyone in modern history. She outmaneuvered the snobs, she outworked the competition, and she outcharmed a prince. She built a business from scratch. She raised a perfect daughter and married her to the future king. By every conceivable metric, she won. But what was the price of that victory? As of 2024, Carole Middleton was 69 years old. Her life's work, Party Pieces, is gone, its reputation in tatters. Her daughter, the future queen, is battling a serious health condition under the glare of a hostile global media. Her family, once a symbol of unbreakable unity, is facing the first real test of its life. The silence she perfected, the discretion that was her armor, is no longer enough. She is in this moment a profoundly human figure, not a climber, not a matriarch, not a strategist, just a mother watching her daughter suffer, just a woman watching her life's work be dismantled. Carole's story is the ultimate reminder that you can follow every rule. You can be perfect, poised, and professional, but you can never, ever control the narrative, especially when that narrative involves the House of Windsor. She wanted the best for her children. She dreamed big, and she achieved the impossible. But the impossible dream has a way of becoming a very real nightmare. She gave her daughter a crown, but she may have lost herself and her family's precious, hard-won peace in the bargain.